Please.
Commissioner DeCosta?
Present.
Commissioner Flores will be marked absent. Commissioner Perillo?
Present.
Vice Chair Khan?
Present.
Chair Hook?
Present. If you could all join me in standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. Put your right hand over your heart. Ready? Begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Moving on to Section 3, our presentations. 3.1, our monthly police department update.
Good evening. These stats are from August 23rd through September 26th. During this time frame, there were 3,013 calls for service. 93 of those were traffic-related collisions, 15 which were minor or just complaints of pain, 340 citations issued, 489 parking violations, 21 vehicle burglaries, 6 which occurred in the surrounding area of Hamner and Limonite, and 115 noise calls. Update on Estancia traffic concerns. Residents of Estancia and mail carriers expressed concerns over vehicles that were parking in front of the community mailboxes. This made it difficult for the delivery of the mail. In most communities located within the city, vehicles can be cited for a municipal code for parking or blocking a community mailbox. But unfortunately, in this area, the streets have not been turned over to the city, so this code would not apply. But recently, the curbs have been painted white, allowing officers to cite for the vehicle code section that prohibits parking. And this enforcement began the week of September 26. On August 31st, Eastville police officers arrested and booked a man for a weapons violation after receiving information he was climbing a scaffolding near the Ralph's grocery store. Court records indicated that on September 2nd, he pled guilty and was sentenced to 30 days in county jail and received 3 years probation. On September 1st, an Eastville officer drove past the address where the same man had been squatting and saw that the front door and garage were open. Knowing the man was incarcerated, the officer entered the residence to ensure no one was burglarizing or taking any of his property. The officer determined the residence was not currently being burglarized, but noticed that the residence appeared to be uninhabitable. He contacted the city, and the building officials concurred the residence was unsafe to inhabit. The residence was secured and posted no trespassing. The squatter was notified in person he could not return to the property without approval from the city, or he would be arrested for trespassing. On Thursday, September 1st, the Eastville traffic team conducted an OTS-funded traffic safety presentation at crosswalks near Eastville Elementary School. During the presentation, traffic safety pamphlets were distributed to nearly 370 parents and students to provide tips for how they may travel to and from school more safely. On Wednesday, September 14, about 6 p.m., a vehicle was speeding southbound on Hellman and collided into an Edison power pole. The vehicle sustained major damage, and the power to the surrounding area was lost. No one was injured during the collision. Edison closed Hellman at River for extended time to make the repairs. On Thursday, September 8th, an Eleanor Roosevelt High School student was riding his bicycle to school when a passenger from a vehicle opened the vehicle's door. The bicycle struck the door, and the bicyclist received minor injuries that did not require medical attention. The driver left the area and is still being sought. On Monday, September 12th, an 18-year-old Eleanor Roosevelt High School student rode his bicycle through a stop sign at Stonegate Drive and Star Ruby Avenue without stopping. A car collided in the front of the bicycle, causing the student to fall to the ground. The student received minor injuries but refused medical treatment. On July 31st, officers from the Eastville Police Department investigated a theft of a Ford Econoline work truck from the 7100 block of Citrus Valley Avenue. City of Eastville. On Wednesday, August 31st, about 10:30 a.m., deputies from the Eastville Special Enforcement Team conducted follow-up investigation into the theft of the work truck and a second auto theft that occurred in the city. The investigation led to the identification of a suspect of both vehicles. The Eastville Special Enforcement Team served a search warrant at the suspect's house, which led to the recovery of numerous stolen items and a third stolen vehicle, which was reported stolen in the city of Riverside on August 13th. A 33-year-old Krupa Valley man was arrested and booked for several counts of possession of a stolen vehicle, possession of stolen property, and a violation of probation. Over a period of several weeks, the Eastville Special Enforcement Team has deployed traditional and innovative strategies to identify and combat mail theft in the city. In the last few weeks, dozens of victims' mail was recovered and a suspect has been identified. Additional details of the investigation and the suspect's identity are being withheld pending further investigation. And that's all I have. Any questions?
No questions.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Moving on to section 3.2, our monthly fire department update.
Good evening, Chair Hook, fellow commissioners. Give you an update. It's been a couple months since I've been here. I've been out on quite a few assignments up north. I prepared some numbers for you for the last 2 months if you'd like those, or I can just go over the last month if you'd like that.
What are you guys comfortable with?
Last month, sorry.
Last month.
Just over the last month?
Last month would be
Okay.
great, thank you.
So that'll take place August 27th through September 27th of 2016. Total number of calls for service, 267, with an average response time of 4.6 minutes. Of those calls, 23 were false alarm type calls, 3 hazardous materials responses, and as usual, the bulk of our calls, medical aids, being at 190, 7 public service assists, 29 traffic collisions, and 1 reported vehicle fire. Station 27 continues to have an uptick in calls. I believe that has a lot to do with the growing population in the city. Station 31 is coming along very well. We're looking at completion date near the end of the year and probably staffing it right after the first of the year. And as I've said before, that's going to obviously take quite a few calls from Station 27 and distribute that workload, and hopefully those response times will get even better than what they are now. Went down to Station 27 or to 31 today, had a meeting. I go to a bi-weekly meeting there just to check on things and meet with the construction supervisors and city staff just to stay on top of the architect and the people that are actually building the station. And it's coming along very nice. I don't know if any of you have driven by there yet, but it's coming along. It's starting to look like a fire station. Paint, concrete, bay doors will be going up next week, and they're going to be securing the station here probably the next week or two with door locks and getting all the glass and everything in. So we're on target to open on time. And I got an email on the way here, and I haven't even been able to share with the city manager, Michelle, yet, that engine 27, the new fire engine, is here, and it's going to be put into service on Thursday of this week. So we're glad to have a new engine to be put in service. Engine 31 is still being built, but engine 31 will be a brand new engine as well. And that's all I have for my report. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer.
No question.
Any questions? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Section 3.3, presentation by Deputy Myers, our active shooter training overview.
Not a big fan of microphones. Is my voice loud enough without it?
Yes.
It's
It's for the public record.
Okay, and I will hold it and use it. Good evening. Basically, I'm just going to give you a 20-minute presentation, kind of a teaser on the full-fledged active shooter for civilians training that I do, which is about 2 hours. It consists of about an hour and a half or so of PowerPoint presentation and training, followed by full force scenarios where we actually get your adrenaline pumping and get you working through some different scenarios with the different tools and things that we provide for you during the training. So most people, when they think of active shooter, they think of all the things that you see on the news, right? A lot of people know about Columbine. You realize Columbine was 17 years ago? Quite a while ago now that we think about it. But, you know, there's 13 people that were killed during that, dozens were wounded, and the actual response time for law enforcement to come was a lot longer than most people are really aware of. How long do you think it took law enforcement to actually get onto the campus with a fallout plan and engage with any suspects? Any ideas?
17 minutes.
17 minutes? Good guess. Anybody else? Nobody else wants to come with any guesses? An hour? Closer. Actually, it was 4 hours before law enforcement actually took action on the campus there. So we learned a lot, not only law enforcement-wise, but kind of nationwide in regarding the response time of law enforcement, the plans of law enforcement regarding these types of activities and different things that happen. Initially, the on-campus school resource officer did engage with the suspects, felt that he was outgunned, and he retreated and waited for SWAT to respond, which is what took the 4 hours to get all of them gathered there together. They then contemplated a plan and went in. The actual incident itself was less than 20 minutes long because the individuals decided to commit suicide after they had taunted students and with students going kind of along with the old thought process of lockdown in place, right? Most of us, as we were brought up in school, we were all taught when there's an emergency situation to lockdown in place. That's what these kids kind of relied on, right? That's what we get drilled on. We do fire alarm drills, we do earthquake drills, that stop, drop, and roll, that duck and cover and hold. All of those things are the natural response because we drill those responses into our kids, and those kids eventually become adults, and with that, that same mindset takes place. With these particular kids that were locking down in place, especially in the library, which is where most of the fatalities were, these kids were hiding under tables that had no kind of concealment for them whatsoever. They were open tables. These kids were just underneath. And so basically these suspects were standing on top of tables, taunting them, and shooting them one by one. So it's very detrimental that we pass along a new mindset, a new way of thinking for people so that we can get them to actually survive these incidences. So one of my favorite quotes that I like to bring up is this one by Theodore Roosevelt. In a moment of decision, the best thing you can do is the right thing. The next best thing is the wrong thing. The worst thing you can do is nothing. Basically sitting back and letting things happen, letting law enforcement take the only form of action whatsoever is unfortunately going to end up with an awful lot of people that die or an awful lot of people that get injured. And we want to take those statistics and bring them down so that we have fewer and fewer people dying in these instances. The better chance that people are to be informed and the better chance that they have to have a larger toolbox and be able to look at the things around them and be able to utilize those things, the better chances people have of surviving these types of incidences. So I know that they gave the statistics for our response times with regards to high priority calls and things like that right here in the city of Eastville. If you had to guess nationwide, what do you think the average response time is for law enforcement when it comes to a high priority call?
10, 15 minutes?
10, 15 minutes?
9.
Anybody else?
9 minutes.
9 minutes? Well, the statistic that I have is an old one. It's from 2000, and it shows that 5 to 6 minutes is the national average. I actually looked this up last week, and the response time has increased to 8 to 9 minutes. So when you look at our response times here in Eastville, they're actually really good when you compare compare them to the national average. But if you're in a situation where you're looking to law enforcement to come and save you, right? You want them there a whole lot faster than that, right?
Yep.
I know I would. If I were, an average civilian that was involved in an active shooter situation and I see Joe Public come in with a gun and start shooting it up, I want law enforcement there as soon as they possibly can get there. The faster they get there, the better chance I have of survival. Well, what if I could do something myself? Wouldn't that be better? Don't you think? If I can arm you with something, not necessarily a handgun, but just some knowledge and things to utilize the tools that are around you every day, your chances of survival skyrocket. They absolutely skyrocket. Statistics show that. So these incidences are resolved. Most people think that it takes law enforcement to resolve them, right? Most people, on average, it doesn't actually. This says 86% of active shooter incidences end once the suspect is confronted with some form of resistance. That's any kind of resistance. It doesn't necessarily have to be from law enforcement. So most of these individuals that do active shooter type of scenarios are not highly trained, are not highly skilled individuals. So if you give them any form of resistance, that's going to be outside of the norm for them. They don't train for that kind of scenario. So they're expecting people to run away from them, to scream, to be petrified, staying still where they're at, and be completely mortified by things, right? They control through fear. Most different organizations, such as ISIS and Al-Qaeda and things like that, they gain control through fear. Same type of thing that gang mentality is, right? They control through fear. If I leave this group, something's going to happen to me, something's going to happen to my family. It's that same mentality. So if somebody actually decides to get up and run towards them, or maybe get up and take a fire extinguisher to hit them over the head, are they going to expect that? No. They don't expect you to come back at them. They don't expect you to take a water bottle that's sitting in front of you and chuck it at their head. They're not expecting that. So if you give them some form of resistance, you're going to throw off that loop, that whole idea that they see how this plans out, right? Everything goes in a regular thing. Their plan is to come in there, take out as many people as they can, as quickly as they can, and either take themselves out or get out of the scenario, right? Most situations, the active shooter commits suicide in almost every situation that we see. In 95% of the situations that we see, they take themselves out because that still leaves them with some form of control, which is the whole scenario of what they're going through psychologically. So there are limitations, obviously, of active shooter tactics, right? There's international versus domestic type of terrorism tactics. Which one do you think, if you had to guess, would be more concerning? International or domestic?
I'd say domestic.
Absolutely. Absolutely domestic, right? Because these people are sitting in their living rooms at home in front of their laptops and becoming radicalized, right? So they're getting all of this training without going to the Holy Land anymore. They don't have to necessarily hit that terror watch list in that they're traveling, all the time, necessarily. They're getting radicalized right here. Whether that be through multiple phone calls, video calls, sitting in front of their computer, coming up with these own little scenarios in their heads, that type of stuff. It's happening right here. Could be your neighbor, could be your employer, could be one of your coworkers. You just don't know, right? We look back to the December incident at the IRC in San Bernardino. It was a coworker, right? But there are several instances that possibly could have raised a red flag so that maybe somebody could have taken a look into him and his wife a little earlier, right? So after the fact, we heard about the neighbor that noticed strange deliveries coming, strange people coming in and out, right? But she didn't want to raise her hand. Why didn't she want to raise her hand?
Fear.
Yeah, fear, right? Because she didn't want to be labeled a racist. She didn't want to be labeled somebody that profiles, right? All of those things that we hear in the media are negative connotations, and we don't want to be like, oh, I don't want to say anything because, just because they're Muslim, I don't want to raise any red flags. Well, there's plenty of peaceful Muslims in the world, plenty of them. The majority of them are. But there are those that are radical that we should be worried about, that we should be raising the red flags, that we should be going, you know what? Something's not right here. You need to pay attention to those little hairs that stand up on the back of your neck and say, something's just not right here. Right? She could have said something, but she didn't. But she's not the only one. He also frequented a Riverside bar, Events Bar and Grill, downtown Riverside, right next to the substation for Riverside Police Department. Used to go down there all the time, regularly. Used to get plowed drunk there all the time. And he would ramble about Al-Qaeda. He would ramble about Allah. He would ramble about kind of being on the side of the terrorists, saying, man, we should have got more people in that. There should have been more deaths. That type of thing. I don't know how many drunks you've been around. I've been around a few. And never once have I seen one that sides with the terrorist or sides with the suspect or starts rambling about terrorist acts. They ramble about some pretty interesting things, but usually it's not that type of behavior. Do you think anybody there raised their hand?
No.
No. No, nobody. They just dismissed it. Oh, he's just a drunk and he's just rambling. Okay, yeah, we've all seen rambling drunks, but again, not that kind of material, right? We're not hearing that kind of stuff. So raising those red flags, raising those hands, questioning the behaviors of people that seems out of the ordinary definitely needs to be brought to the forefront. Let law enforcement know. That way we can check into it and see if there's any validity to it. But at least raise that flag so that we can make those checks happen. So I'm going to leave you with a video. This video I'm sure many of you have seen, but it's kind of that national mindset that we want to put you in today. Is there sound? No sound? No.
Is there sound on there? Joe, if there's sound on the laptop, the microphone.
you are out of the line of fire, try to prevent others from walking into the danger zone, then call 911. If you can't get out safely, you need to find a place to hide. Act quickly and quietly. Try to secure your hiding place the best you can. Turn out lights, and if possible, remember to lock doors. Silence your ringer and vibration mode on your cell phone. And if you can't find a safe room or closet, try to conceal yourself behind large objects that may protect you. Do your best to be quiet and calm. As a last resort, if your life is at risk, whether you're alone or working together as a group, fight. Act with aggression. Improvise weapons. Disarm. And commit to taking the shooter down, no matter what. Try to be aware of your environment. Always have an exit. Know that in an incident like this, victims are generally chosen randomly. The event is unpredictable and may evolve quickly. The first responders on the scene are not there to evacuate or tend to the injured. They are well trained and are there to stop the shooting. Your actions can make a difference for your safety and survival. Be aware and be prepared. And if you find yourself facing an active shooter, there are 3 key things you need to remember to survive. Run, hide, fight.
Okay, so this is kind of the basics, right? Run, hide, fight. This is being taught nationally now, not only with city officials and different county projects and things like that, but we're literally trying to move into the schools now and teach it to them as well. One pretty powerful quote that was given regarding Columbine was to one of the victim's parents, and she said, "All my child had was a pencil, and you said you were outgunned." As a law enforcement officer that signed up to put my life in the line of fire if I need to protect other citizens, that one hits pretty hard for me. That just kind of lightens it for me to want to educate people and give them the tools that they need to survive an incident like this. So we kind of expand on the run, hide, fight. We break it up into something that's called ALICE, where initially there's some kind of an alert, whether that be gunfire or screaming or some kind of information. Then you have choices to make. Lock it down if you have to, right? Then you need to inform people, right? You need to get the word out there. Let 911 know what's going on. There's not every situation that you're in where you can actually safely call 911 and give all of that information to dispatch. So you have to get creative and utilize other tools like social media. I can't tell you how many people will check their Facebook notifications and their Twitter updates and all that stuff all throughout the day, whether they're at work or not. So maybe you can't sit on the phone with dispatch because you're trying to hide and stay quiet and conceal where you're at. But there are other ways to get the information out there. Then you need to look at, countering the action. Are you in a place where you can utilize something around you? If you're in an office, can you pick up a 3-hole punch and use it? Yeah. Can you pick up a stapler and use that? Yeah. If you got those little stretch squishy balls on your desk, you chuck that at somebody's head, is that going to get their attention? Absolutely. It's not going to hurt them, but it's going to throw them off that state of mind that they're in, where they're going in there for one purpose and one purpose only, and that's to take out as many people as they can, as quickly as they can. If you throw off that whole thought process, the chances of survival, not only for you, but for the other people around you, go up dramatically. And then you have evacuate, right? If you can run, absolutely run. If that bad person is coming inside and doing damage and you can get outside safely, do it. But don't just hang out, right? You want to get far, far away. You don't want to hang out and wait for something else to happen. So basically this kind of just gives you a little bit of information, a little bit of teaser of some of the education and things that we can provide. I go all throughout the county and our contract cities teaching these informational scenarios and seminars. And I highly recommend them, and I'm also coming down to the city and performing a training for them coming up very soon. But basically that gives you an idea of what we do. Do you guys have any questions?
No, thanks. I don't have any questions this time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to item 3.4, calls for service prioritization process.
Wait on the PowerPoint. Good evening. Several meetings ago, I promised to do a little bit better, or do a presentation to explain how the call types are prioritized through our Sheriff's Communication Center. And I have a very short PowerPoint to go over some of the key points. Apologize, it's a little harder to read, especially for me. But thanks. We have priorities. We have 4 priorities of calls, and the 1 being the most serious, down to a 4 being a past crime or call for service. The first one, the priority 1 calls, are calls where the dispatchers are trained to identify certain criteria that would lead them or lead the deputies who will be responding to believe that there's an immediate threat to somebody's life. And typically in our line of work, that has to do with crimes of violence. The second is the priority 2 calls for service. Those are calls for service where it requires an immediate response of a deputy, but there is not an immediate threat to life. There may be immediate results of possibly an injury, but not necessarily someone's life's in immediate danger. The third are priority 3 calls, which are fairly common, especially in the evening hours. They tend to be a lot more priority 3 versus during the day we get a lot more of the priority 4s. But you'll see that those are where there's no risk of injury to anyone. And those are things like arguments or, perhaps a crime that's occurring, but no one is going to be harmed. Maybe it's somebody breaking into a car or something like that. And priority 4 calls are property crimes. They're typically past crimes, and there's no immediate risk to property or to life. And obviously, there are more, looking at the number of calls that are potential types of calls for crime types, there are thousands of crimes classifications, but we break it down to 226 calls. And I didn't put it up on the slide because it would take up too much time, but I have a stack 6 pages of different types of calls from priority 1 to priority 4, so that when we have questions of our dispatch, we can reach out to them and they can explain to us why this is a priority 1 or a 2 or a 3 or a 4. One thing I will say is what will happen is if in a scenario, let's say there's somebody breaking into a car, someone calls 911 and there's a person in the dispatch center, typically in the basement, who will receive that information. They will input the information real time onto the computer. When they've gathered enough information to where they have enough to dispatch an officer to the scene, they will then send that information electronically to the communication center, which is where the radio operators are located. So there's one floor takes the phone calls, the other floor is actually broadcasting the information over the radio and monitoring what the deputies are telling them. Those calls, as soon as the operator takes the information from the phone and enters it, depending on one of those 226 call types, it is now considered it goes towards the response time. It's been received, and that's when the clock starts ticking. That information goes to a dispatcher, and if it's a past crime, a priority 4 or a priority 3 call, that information goes into a queue, and there's a computer screen with lists and lists of calls for all the different service areas for the sheriff's department. And then we have a communications officer at a console just monitoring a particular area. In our area, it's Harupa Valley Station. And they would be responsible for dispatching and monitoring all the calls for service in all of the contract cities that we serve from the Harupa Valley Station. So they would then, depending on the priority of the call, they would send that call electronically to a deputy in a patrol car. That deputy then acknowledges the call on their computer screen, reads the text of the call, and either responds to the location to handle it, or so a lot of times it can be done over the phone if maybe it's like somebody wants to report identity theft and they have no evidence to provide us. That's something that can be handled over the phone. Priority 1 and priority 2 calls are always broadcast over the radio. And then it's followed up by the call being dispatched to a deputy electronically, like we discussed. And the purpose for that is there may be only 3 officers in the field assigned to patrol in the city. But when a priority 1 or priority 2 call comes out, they put that information over the radio because we also have school resource officers, we have parks deputy, we have traffic, we have SET, we have administrators that may be in the city, or maybe there's a deputy from another station that came to our city for lunch. They all hear that information, and then if they're available, they can respond to that call for service. The priority type is automatically generated when the dispatcher types in the call type. So if I type in the code for a petty theft, 488, the CAD system prioritizes that call and makes it a priority 4 call. If there are some circumstances where it's a 488 and the person tells the dispatcher that they believe that person is armed, or they see that person has a weapon, the dispatcher has the ability to change that call type from a priority 4 to now it may be a priority 2 or a priority 1, and that happens a lot. And when we talk about raw data and average response times nationwide, I can't speak for any other law enforcement entities, but for the Riverside Sheriff's Department, if you are on the phone with the dispatcher giving them information that your call meets the criteria of a priority 4, and then call back in 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and say, that guy that I told you was in the backyard trying to steal my lawn furniture, which would be maybe a priority 3, now becomes a priority 2. So it gets broadcast over the radio, but the clock's been ticking for the last 10 minutes, and it changes. Once that call type changes, it doesn't change the start time. So a lot of times the data can be skewed. The deputies, dispatch supervisor, or the dispatch any of the dispatchers in the communication center have the ability to change the call types that we discussed, and the supervisors at the communication center monitor those. And they spend a lot of time training and discussing, both informally and in formal training sessions, how to prioritize, when to change call priority types, and when to drop a call priority type. Because a lot of times we'll get a priority 1 or priority 2 call where the person says that person has a knife or a gun, and then we get subsequent calls and the person says, no, I'm here and he has a rake and he's raking his lawn. Well, we have the ability to change that call type so we can divert officers from that, which is now a low priority call, to something that could be more pressing. We've already talked about some of the examples of priority ones. Again, there are 226, so I just picked a few of the major ones that I think everybody could relate to. This is a priority 1, immediate threat. So that would be broadcast over the radio and then assigned electronically to a deputy. A priority 2 would be, it's a high priority call, and this will also be broadcast over the air, but it won't be as high a priority as something where someone's life's in immediate danger. Priority 3 we talked about was there is no risk to life, but there is a risk to property loss. So that would be 3. And then the last one is priority 4s. Having said that, I do not have the most recent average response time report. That won't come out until the beginning of October. So nothing has changed as far as my report is for response time since our last meeting. Are there any questions?
No, sir, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Moving on to section 4, our consent calendar. Is there any items anyone wishes to pull?
I didn't have anything. I'll make a motion to accept and approve.
I'll second.
Could I have a vote, please?
Commissioner Perrella,
Aye.
Commissioner DeCosta,
Aye.
Vice Chair Cone,
Aye.
Chair Hood.
Aye.
Motion passes 4-0.
Section 5, business items. 5.1, school traffic safety update.
I feel like I was just here. I was recently, with the start of the 2016-2017 school year here in Eastvale and all of Corona-Norco Unified School District, the district received some emails and inquiries from parents and residents regarding the safety of the students in regards to traffic and traffic collisions. And Sergeant Davis shared 2 of those collisions. Both of them were bicyclists involved in a collision with the vehicle, and both involved those kids having minor injuries. It's unfortunate that those occurred, but it's also unfortunate that they occurred 1 week after the other, shortly after school began. So there was some understandable concerns from parents, and oftentimes because of social media, it's unfiltered and you can say what you want. There was a lot of discussion about a perceived increase in traffic collisions, particularly around the schools, this year more than last. So Corona-Norco asked me to prepare a report and provide them with some statistics to see if that was the case. And after providing them with the information, and talking with our city manager and our city engineer, we decided it would be good to present the Safety Commission with an update with our findings. So the city manager and Joe Enderwan and I worked on, and other city staff worked on gathering the information that's in this report, and I believe you have a copy in front of you, perhaps? Okay. So what we did was, at the request of Corona-Norco, we looked at the collision stats in the city of Eastvale from July 1st of 2015 to September 12th of 2015. And the 12th being, September 12th being the date that the report was provided to the school district. We also pulled collision statistics from the same time period for this year. So we're comparing apples to apples at the beginning of the school year. And what we found that during those time frames, both years, there were no major injury traffic collisions in or around any of the schools in Eastville. It also showed that there were fewer traffic collisions in and around the schools during those time periods in minor injury collisions, injuries where there was a complaint of pain, and also non-injury collisions. So all collisions were down unilaterally over from 2015 to 2016. And the ways that we've tackled those issues and ways that we've tried to bring those numbers down are, I know you've heard this before from me, it's three components. We focus on traffic enforcement, traffic engineering, and traffic education programs. And what I'd like to do is just touch on a few highlights of some of the things that have occurred since the beginning of this year. And I'm going to start with engineering, and Mr. Indrawan will jump in you feel free to jump in if you'd like to comment further. One of the things we did was, or that the city's done, is they've adjusted and evaluated the signal light timing near the schools. They did that to maximize the safety, because if a signal light is too short for vehicles, there's more of a likelihood someone will run a red light. If it's too long, then it creates other problems. Our traffic engineers have gone to college and learned ways to time them as best as possible to make them as safe as possible. And they've done that at Granja Vista del Rio, at Citrus, and they've done it at Citrus and Hamner. In addition to signal light adjustment, they added a left turn lane for vehicles that are traveling eastbound on Citrus, intending to turn left or go north onto Hamner. They also implemented a number of traffic calming measures and added signage near a number of schools. And for what I mean by traffic calming measures, and Joe can feel free to add to that, is that there are things that you can do with shrubbery, with lane markings, with signage that will inherently, subconsciously or consciously cause drivers to slow down, pay more attention, make it more likely that they are going to stop. And some of those measures that were implemented were a no right turn signal or sign was added at Granja Vista del Rio and Citrus to keep vehicles from making a right turn into the neighborhood and then making an abrupt U-turn, which was creating a lot of backup and safety concerns. At Whispering Hills and Harrison, no right turn on red signs were added, and traffic calming measures were implemented there as well. At Schleisman and Harrison, the city went out and worked on roadway improvements to increase visibility for drivers, giving them more time to react to any potential threats. And they added a no right turn on red sign. On Scholar Way, they added lane delineators to discourage people from making illegal U-turns. At Ramirez Intermediate, they added no left turn sign and no entry signs. At Citrus and Hamner, they added a left turn lane for westbound Citrus traffic. And a number of traffic counts were conducted adjacent to several schools in order to evaluate the possibility, or to see if there was enough vehicle and foot traffic to meet the threshold to hire a crossing guard.
Lieutenant,
Sir.
if I may add, Commissioners, Mr. Chair, this is information that as fresh as today. Actually, we posted it on Friday, but as far as crossing guards, for example, we have received the information that we did last week for Clara Barton and Ronald Reagan. So we are processing that. So the information that you see here is really the updated information that as much we can to give it to you, not from last year or something like that. Some of them from a few months ago. Just want to let you know on that.
Thank you.
They've also implemented traffic calming measures and added no right turn on red signs during school hours at Whispering Hills and Harrison, and at Harrison and Schleisman. Using grant funds, a citywide bicycle master plan was created, which will be implemented in the future. In mid-October, actually this week, I believe, 3 camera systems will be installed at locations throughout the city to enhance the public safety as a deterrent for crime, and also to monitor traffic at key locations, and also to identify and apprehend any violators.
If I may interrupt for a second,
Yeah.
Michelle, are these the cameras that City Council voted on for the city's purchase and approval?
Yes, Chairperson Hook, that's what I was actually just going to interject and state. This is the poll cameras that the commission, the Public Safety Commission, and the City Council met with the vendor. You guys had a joint meeting with the vendor and were given a presentation. So these are the 3 cameras that the commission and the council collectively decided upon. I do want to stress that these are not traffic cameras. They're not red light cameras. They're not going to be, sending out citations. So I just want to make sure that the public understands the purpose of these is really to move them throughout the city and identify areas where we have potential problems or recurring problems, such as the racing on Belgrave on the weekends. The intent is to move these cameras around and catch footage of people doing the things that citizens are complaining about, that when we send someone to respond, we're not able to catch them in the act. So now we're trying to use video cameras to, document the situation and catch them in the act, and then go back and follow up. So these are the cameras.
Thank you.
And just to add the timing, Lieutenant is correct. It's going to be either this week or next week. And we are going to install the camera and make it use after that in conjunction with the work that we have with the Sheriff Department.
We've also, the City Council approved the purchase of a second radar speed trailer that we have received and are using at a number of the schools. That trailer is also good because it collects the data rather than just displaying it. We can use that data to tailor our enforcement. So we're not out there at 2 in the afternoon when all the speeding is occurring at 5. And that's very beneficial. Using $84,000 of Beyond Grant funding, speed advisory signs will be installed around school zones.
And Lieutenant, I have to add another information on this. It's good news, Commissioners. We have open bid this afternoon. We have 6 bids, and 3 of them are really close, and we cannot disclose all the companies at this point because we're still reviewing the paperwork. But it's good news. We have the bid open, and we're going to be reviewing documents, and working on the installer and the contractor to start installing these radar speed signs in the locations that we are going to be working with the schools, so they're aware that we're going to be putting those.
If I may also add, Commissioners, these speed radar signs were specifically identified for the school zones, and much like the speed radar trailers, they will be collecting data. So this would assist the Sheriff's Department in the allocation of resources, because we'll be able to pull the data from the machines and analyze it to see the peak times and traffic patterns.
We've also added a student pickup and drop-off on Schleisman, east of Scholar, to help relieve some of the traffic there. And in the near future, a traffic signal will be installed at 65th and Sumner. And that's just for the engineering portion. In the enforcement arena, as you all are well aware, in July of 2016, City Council approved an additional 10 hours of patrol per day, which is the equivalent to adding 1 officer to the streets each day. At the next meeting, I will have an update on looking at the calls for service, response time, et cetera, since comparing the year prior to, or a period 90 days prior to adding the officer to 90 days after, to kind of gauge how effective it's been. In October of 2015, our city approved the purchase of a motorcycle, and we had our motor officer began enforcement then. We have 3 sworn traffic officers now that deploy to the Eastvale schools each day, and they rotate. We have 8 schools with pickup and drop-off time, so it's 16 periods that need to be covered. The officers rotate. The traffic team knows the rotation schedule, and we shared the rotation schedule with the school district, so they're aware. And when they get calls, they have an idea of where we'll be, et cetera. And comparing 2015 to 2016, traffic citations increased by 35%. Lastly, I wanted to touch on the educational component. Our city staff, the Sheriff's Department, and Corona Norco Unified School District created a traffic pamphlet last year for parents and students in the district. That pamphlet was distributed at the schools. It's posted at the schools, and it's also on the district's website. And I believe we have it posted on ours as well. The city staff and the police department participate every year, and we will again this year, next week, in International Walk to School Day. And we've had numerous grant-funded enforcement and educational programs in and around the schools this last year. And Sergeant Davis, in addition to being the traffic sergeant, he's also our grant coordinator. So he's the one that identifies the areas where collisions are occurring or where we're getting the complaints, and he curtails the, he takes the guidelines that are required from the state and the federal government and implements them in finding places where we'll get the most bang for our buck in the city. And it's no surprise that the schools are obviously always high on the list. Some of those programs were the bicycle safety enforcement, bicycle, vehicle, and pedestrian traffic pamphlets, education. Back up. The officers went out using grant funding to the schools, a couple of the elementary schools, and stopped the kids and the parents and talked to them and educated them quickly so they could get to school, and gave them flyers on how to get to school safely and get home from school safely. I can't tell you how many meetings I've had with Joe and Craig and the school district and some of the safety commissioners at different school sites evaluating traffic plans. It's been dozens of them. And each time we take our findings and we roundtable and we talk about engineering, education, and enforcement, and how we can best meet the needs of those individual schools. We also work closely with, again, with the school district and our school resource officers in delivering a message via the school blackboard, pamphlets, you name it, on when we start to notice a rise in collisions due to a particular traffic issue. We evaluate that, and we have the school resource officers work with the district safety folks in getting that message out to the kids and to the parents. And we just recently had one of our deputies work with the city to create a pedestrian bicycle safety pamphlet that was distributed on the city website as well as at the school sites. And that concludes this report. Are there any questions?
Questions, thank you.
Thank you.
Chairperson Hook, if I could just interject, if there are any members of the public that would like a copy of the school safety tips that Lieutenant Forbes just referenced, we have some extra copies here.
Thank you. Section 6, public comment. Do we have any? Moving on to Section 7, city staff report.
Good evening, Chairperson Hook and Commissioners. A few updates for you. As Lieutenant Forbes and Sergeant Davis mentioned earlier regarding the Apple Moss squatter, wanted to give you an update. The city did lien the property a few weeks ago in an effort to make sure that we recover all of our expenses. Because the property is going up for auction, it has been up for auction, and several investors have come to City Hall inquiring about the status of the property and flipping it. So I didn't want the city to be left holding the bag on all of the expenses, so we liened the property, and the city attorney's office has gotten involved, and it was about to go to a conservator through the legal process. We have since been able to enter into a negotiation with Deutsche Bank, that's the owner of the property, as well as their investor that is buying it at auction, and they will be paying off and cost recovery for all of the city's expenses related to that property. And it looks like once all parties execute the agreement, the property will be rehabbed and put up for sale.
So to be clear, the full lien amount has been negotiated to be paid without actually going through the complete lien process.
No, there's a lien on the property.
Right. What
And
I'm
they're-
saying is the
they're
new
going to-
buyer and investor are agreeing to pay the full amount.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
And we're not negotiating down the price.
Okay.
So they're going to have to pay the full face value of the lien. And they're asking for additional documents, and we're going to include that as part of
And that's
their
that's
expense.
incumbent of all expenses from police calls and any city staff that's had to go out there?
That is the sheriff's department time. That is code enforcement time. Excuse me, there was no code enforcement time on this one. So it was a chief building official, sheriff's department, and legal fees.
Great, thank you.
It's approximately $16,000 to $18,000, I believe. So we wanted to let you know that that situation is should be resolved in the next few days. I know that's been a headache for many folks that live in that area. Also wanted to share some news with these commissioners and citizens that the city of Eastvale has experienced a net taxable value increase in home properties and household residential dwellings, an increase of 5.2% for 2006 and 17 tax roll. New residential construction and the sales of new homes added $111.7 million in improvement value to 337 parcels spread throughout the city. The median home price for a single-family home in Eastvale from January through August of 2016 was $495,000. This represents a $15,000 increase in the median sales price from 2015. This is based on the property tax report from HDL that does our annual reporting. Also in this document, they did point out that Eastvale has the second highest median home price in all of Riverside County. I think we were behind La Quinta. So we're number 2 in the county for home property values. There's also several other announcements I'd like to bring to the Commission's attention. One is that Deputy Myers that came and gave us that wonderful presentation, she is also the officer that is in charge of our Neighborhood Watch program. So we do have some flyers here for any members of the community that would like to learn about how to establish a Neighborhood Watch program in your neighborhood. It has Deanna Myers, Deputy Myers' contact information on there, and this information is also posted on the city's website. I also want to bring to your attention that this is a very busy month, October. It's a very busy month for the city of Eastvale. Tomorrow we have the city council meeting, and I would like to congratulate the commissioners, staff, and all of citizens in the special recognition from Money Magazine. I hope you have all seen that. Money rated the city of Eastvale as #1 for best in state and number 17 for best in the nation for where to live. So that's a huge honor. That is not something we solicited. It was not even something that they made us aware of until it just came out on Google. So we were quite surprised, and we're very proud of it. So with that, we are having a reception tomorrow evening, just a simple congratulatory reception prior to the city council meeting. There's been a tremendous turnout, and unfortunately we did have to close the event. We did an Eventbrite posting. Due to occupancy, we did have to close the event, but we have held spaces for all the commissioners. If you are not able to make it, please let us know so that we can relinquish your spot to someone else that would like to attend. So that is tomorrow at 5 p.m. and then followed by the regular city council meeting. Also this weekend, October 1st, is the Fall Festival. That's a large annual event here in the city of Eastvale. It will be at Harada Heritage Park beginning at 2 p.m. That same date also marks the city's 6th anniversary. So we will have a booth at the event as usual, and we'll be passing out some celebratory birthday cake. October 3rd is the Eastvale Candidate Forum. This is not a city event. This is hosted by the Eastvale Chamber of Commerce, and that will be at Augie Ramirez Intermediate School beginning at 6:30. October 5th is International Walk to School Day, and we hope that any of the commissioners that have the time would join us at one of the school sites. We have city staff that are participating, sheriff's department, fire department staff, as well as district staff that will be representing our efforts at many of the school sites. So if you have a favorite, please let us know and we'll put you down. Daniela McClister is coordinating this effort. And we are the only city in all of Riverside County that has every school participating for the 3rd year in a row. But we've been doing this for several years, but we are consistently the only city that gets all of our schools to participate. And you'll see it makes a huge impact on traffic that day. And that's really the point of the event, is to create some awareness about how the alternative forms of transportation can affect the traffic conditions here in the city. So it'll be a relatively traffic-free day on October 5th in the morning. October 6th is the Eastvale Chamber of Commerce's Connection Breakfast at Buffalo Wild Wings at 7 a.m. October 14th is Augie Ramirez Intermediate School's annual Food Truck Festival. That's at 5 p.m. November 5th is our 2nd community cleanup and paper shredding event at Ramirez from 8 a.m. to noon. That was a hugely successful event. So much so that we had cars wrapping all around the block. And it was the most tonnage that Waste Management has ever in their history recovered during a community cleanup event. And this is part of our contract services through Waste Management. It is free. We did put some limits on the paper shredding portion of it this time because it got a little out of control with people showing up with, an entire carload full of documents to shred. The details for all of these events can be found on the city's website. If anyone wants to volunteer to help us for November 5th, we would love to have any volunteers that are willing and able. And then lastly, February 11th, the city of Eastvale, in collaboration with our community partners, Europa Community Services District, will be holding the first annual Veterans Day ceremony at American Heroes Park at 8:30 a.m. That's a Friday morning.
November 11th?
Yes, sir, November 11th. Another announcement for the commission is that the notice of availability for public review of the environmental impact report for the Eastville Crossings Commercial Retail Project was published today. That's also known as the Walmart project. I'd like to advise the commissioners and the public that comments on social media are not considered official public comment. If you have anything that you would like to submit, there is specific instructions in the notice of availability on how to share your comments on the project. Comments may be submitted no later than 5 p.m. on Thursday, November 17th. And we do ask that the commission not engage in any comments on the project on social media or other, to just please direct all public comment to Eric Norris, our planning director. I believe that's all I have.
I do have one question. We're talking back with waste management and part of our commitment to them. Does that shredding go towards the amount of recyclables that we have to provide to maintain our agreement?
The community cleanup days, all of the tonnage that is collected that day via shredding, e-waste, and regular waste, that does go into our diversion report, which goes annually to CalRecycle.
Okay.
So yes, it does help us with our mandated diversion.
Thank you. Any other questions?
No questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Section 8, Commission Communications.
I wanted to, in light of all the situations going on with response times, I wanted to share a story that I was brought into knowledge of over the weekend. There was a situation that took place at the CVS on Schleisman and Archibald. A witness of drug activity took place, and the individual called 911. Making the call, before they could finish filling their water bottles and leaving the scene, the police had arrived on scene, and they were commendable on law enforcement's efforts to be there as quickly as they were. So I just wanted to share that.
That's more of a question, and it's directed towards Lieutenant Forbes, Sergeant Davis. Well, it's obviously one of the big concerns in not just Riverside County, but in Southern California are these mailbox break-ins. It's kind of a thing that's spreading around. It's not localized to us. It's spreading around the state. Is there anything, in your opinion, that we can do as a commission or as a community that would assist the special enforcement teams in addressing this situation?
The biggest help for us is when people see something that's suspicious, that they call, rather than rationalizing why it might, rationalizing it away. So if they call us, more than likely it'll be nothing, but at least it gives us an opportunity. Because those little bits and pieces of information, maybe a partial plate off of a vehicle or a vehicle make and model, and then the next call we get a color, we put all the pieces together and we have a crystal clear picture of who our suspect is. And so that would be the best thing that to help us in serving the community is to call when they see something suspicious. And our residents do a great job of identifying issues, and they're mostly, for the most part, they're not shy about calling us, and that's good. And we'd ask that they refrain from, or by all means, post on social media, but make sure that they call us then post on social media. So we have that information. I can't tell you how many times somebody's called me to say they saw something on social media and they want to know what we're doing, and we don't monitor social media. So we'll find out that it was never reported. So then we're kind of behind the curve. So that would be tremendous. Specifically to mailbox theft, a lot of residents have put cameras facing the mailboxes from their own homes, which is a benefit and helps us, again, put the pieces together. Keeping the shrubbery down so that it's visible. And if they have neighborhood watch, they get to know their neighbors and they can say, this person, I know this person, this guy here jogging at 2 a.m, he's my neighbor and he's okay to be going to the mailbox versus some other guy. So
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Commissioner Khan, Vice Chair Khan, if I could also add that we've been in discussions with Congressman Calvert's office regarding this issue and have been working with his staff as well as the postmaster, trying to push them to take a more aggressive stance. And right now there's not an easy fix. And the post office has stated that due to their financial struggles and lack of resources, they have no intent of removing cluster mailboxes. So I know there's been much discussion in the community about, well, I'm just going to, put my own mailbox in front of my house. That's not possible, and the USPS will not deliver to it. So unfortunately, we're kind of stuck with these cluster mailboxes throughout the community. That's kind of the standard throughout the entire region. And it was done for an efficiency measure for the USPS to increase their efficiency and their response for mail delivery. There are some tips that have been posted on the city's Facebook page, not Facebook page, but the city's website and social media that advise citizens of what they should know about cluster mailboxes. It was kind of a FAQ, and it did give some tips about how to prevent your cluster mailbox theft. And some of them are rather common sense issues, like don't leave your mail in there overnight or for multiple days. And that is one of the common things that we're hearing from citizens, is that I had 5 days of mail in there. So we're really encouraging citizens to recover their mail every single day. Do not leave it in there overnight. Anyway, we will continue to work with the Congressman's office on this and see if we can come to some productive resolutions.
Thank you.
In January, I was a victim of the mailbox thefts that were going around. And soon after, there was a burglary just down the street. So it was a heightened awareness going on in my little small part of Eastville on the south end of the city. And as a result of the mail theft, I live directly across from a cluster mailbox. I right away went and got a camera and aimed it strategically at that cluster mailbox for the purpose of just recording consistently. And the camera memory and everything, it maintains about 3 days worth of recording. Since that time, I have not had any recurring thefts at our mailbox. It's in plain view, so if somebody was at the mailbox, they know they're being watched. We don't have any signs up or anything like that. I know people have posted on social media about putting signs on the cluster mailboxes that there's surveillance at this mailbox site. But having it in plain view, I think, is one of the deterrents that's it's warranted, a need for people to be aware that they're being watched. The other thing I was going to mention was I also followed up with a call to the United States Postmaster General, and they had a special agency within they have their own like inspectors and police department, and you can report when these thefts take place. I don't think I was the only one that complained to them, because they changed the locks before the summer hit. So our cluster mailbox master lock had its cylinder and everything replaced, and I witnessed the gentleman coming out from the post office with a utility vehicle to do that job. And the last thing I wanted to mention is maybe on the website with the tips regarding the cluster mailboxes and information, if we could give that information as well to the Postmaster General or the inspectors. I forget what their name and numbers are, but I can get that to you.
It is posted.
It is?
Yes,
And
it is
that was all I was
posted.
going to make mention.
With the, in the FAQ, it gives the telephone number for the agent, the office that you're supposed to report the mailbox theft to
Right.
at the Postmaster General, as well as the telephone number for the Sheriff's Department, because really you should be reporting to both if you've been a victim of cluster mailbox theft.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we will have additional information for you shortly. We'll send out a press release. We've recovered a lot of mail, as Sergeant Davis explained, and somebody will be going to jail very shortly, but I can't give up more than that just yet. So with any luck, it'll help bring the numbers down.
Anything else? Thank you very much. Moving on to item 9, future agenda items. I did have one thing I wanted to bring up. Last meeting, Vice Chair Khan had brought up our school liaison program again. Where do we stand on getting that back onto our agenda so we can start assigning schools and reaching out?
It's my understanding that the commissioners still have the same schools that you had previously. So that it's up to the commission to be contacting your school site and having something prepared to report.
Okay.
We can put it as an agenda item, or it can just be taken care of during commissioner comments.
I just remember when we first started, your staff or yourself had sent out emails to the principals letting them know that we'd be contacting them, and if maybe we could get that heads up to them again, so that way it's not a shock and awe factor of why they're being contacted and think maybe something's wrong.
Okay, we can do that.
Anything else? No? Okay. If there's nothing else, we'll call this meeting adjourned at 7:26.